Good evening, it's Saturday, the 30th of August. You're tuned in to our 10 p.m. newscast coming to you from Arirang's news centre in Seoul. It's fabulous to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story tonight, North Korea's foreign minister will visit New York City next month to attend the UN General Assembly, becoming the first North Korean foreign minister to visit the US in 15 years. Sources say Ri Su-yong will deliver a keynote address at the session as a state representative. Political observers are watching to see whether the visit will foster improved ties between Pyongyang and Washington. Observers say there's a high possibility that Lee will hold talks with US officials during his visit. The last time a North Korean foreign minister attended the UN General Assembly was all the way back in 1999. Japanese lawmaker Antonio Inoki has held talks with North Korea's ceremonial head of state Kim Jong-nam. Inoki, a former wrestler who is in Pyongyang to co-host a sporting event, is thought to have discussed a number of thorny bilateral issues with Kim. Last month, Japan lifted some unilateral sanctions against North Korea in return for its opening of a fresh investigation into the whereabouts of Japanese citizens abducted by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 80s. The United Nations is once again urging Japan to take full blame for the sexual enslavement of tens of thousands of women from Korea and elsewhere in Asia during World War II. The UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination said on Friday that by failing to treat the aging survivors in a respectful and proper way, Japan had let their suffering drag on for decades. The committee's deputy head, Anastasia Crinkley, says Tokyo needs to conclude investigations into the human rights abuses, bring those responsible to justice, and pursue a comprehensive and lasting resolution on the sex slavery issue. Historians say some 200,000 women and girls, mainly from Korea, but also from a number of other Asian countries, were forced to work in Japanese military brothels before and during World War II. Now, back here in Korea, and the country's main opposition party has held a mass rally in central Seoul on this Saturday to call for the swift passage of legislation to investigate in much greater detail the sinking of the Seoul ferry that happened in April. The ruling party wants opposition lawmakers back in the National Assembly as the deadlock has brought all work in Parliament to a complete halt. Our Jim Young-gil has this report.
Thousands of main opposition party members and party leaders are staging street protests calling for the special Seoul ferry bill to meet the demands of the victims' families. Ha Kyung-sung, the interim chief of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is urging President Park Geun-hye to meet with the bereaved families in a bid to call for the enactment of the special bill. The opposition chief has been firm on her stance that the special bill must be passed ahead of other pending bills at the National Assembly. However, the ruling Saenuri Party is demanding the special bill be dealt with separately, so bills aimed at improving the people's livelihoods can be voted upon. Ruling party lawmakers accuse the main opposition of using the ferry bill as a means to further its own political ends. After Saturday's mass rally, opposition party leaders plan to march from Jindo's Paekmokhan Harbor, the nearest site to the ferry sinking, to Seoul sometime next week. As the National Assembly's regular session begins on Monday, the ruling party is scheduled to meet with the victims' families for a third time in the hope of reaching a compromise over the bill. The families are demanding the investigative committee be given the right to investigate and indict. They also insist the ruling party should not be allowed to select any of the 7-member panel tasked with choosing a special counsel. The government has been accused of bungling its initial response to the ferry disaster, which left more than 300 people dead or missing. Jim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, the deepening crisis in Ukraine is dominating a summit of European Union leaders that is taking place right now in Brussels. EU officials say the leaders of the 28-member bloc will send a clear message to Russia to de-escalate the crisis. This comes as Ukraine is calling for full membership to NATO in its strongest plea yet for Western military help after accusing Russia of sending armoured columns into eastern Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday warned Western nations to avoid messing with Russia, pointing out that it's a nuclear-armed power. NATO is also reportedly considering a new rapid reaction force to boost the military bloc's defences in response to this crisis. NATO Secretary-General Anders Fogh Rasmussen is calling on Russia to take immediate and verifiable steps towards de-escalation. Now, Syrian rebels holding 44 Fijian UN peacekeepers hostage have attacked Filipino troops in the Golan Heights area, which is near the border of Syria and Israel. Officials in Manila say Philippine peacekeepers at one UN encampment were being attacked on Saturday morning local time, but those at another were safely evacuated. The Philippine military says there were 40 Filipino troops in the encampment that came under attack and 35 in the second. The Syrian rebels seized the Fijian peacekeepers on Thursday. The rebels then demanded the 75 Filipinos manning two separate UN encampments surrender their weapons, but they refused to do so. The UN says the situation remains very fluid at this time. The UN also stressed that it has received assurances from credible sources that the detained Fijian peacekeepers are safe and in good health. Back here in Korea, and the country is facing a very serious problem of a dwindling number of young people. This as a result of having one of the lowest birth rates in the entire world. Very recently, in fact, the number of students in Korea fell below the 7 million mark for the first time in decades. Our Chae-sun reports.
This was a typical scene at primary schools in Korea in the early 1980s. School grounds packed with students during an autumn sports day. Classes were even divided up into morning and afternoon groups due to overloaded enrollment. That's all in the past now. Statistics show the number of students attending primary to secondary schools combined with kindergartners dropped down to the 6 million range this year. It peaked at 10 million in the 80s but has gradually fallen since. All of this can be attributed to the country's low birth rate. Due largely to the high cost of getting married and raising kids, Korea has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. A Korean woman is estimated to have 1.19 babies in her lifetime. What's interesting to note this year, meanwhile, is the slight slowdown in the rate of decline among primary schoolers. This is because most of the kids who enter the first grade this spring were born in 2007, the year of the golden pig, considered to bring prosperity according to the Chinese zodiac. In fact, the number of first graders jumped by nearly 10% or more than 40,000. Consequently, the effect of their exodus was felt in kindergartens. The small but continuous growth of kindergartners in recent years, 7% last year, changed direction to a near minus 1%. Experts say the government should address the fundamental reasons behind women opting not to have children, such as unemployment and the country's high cost of private education, to turn around the falling numbers. 최유선, Arirang News.
Now, fears, we all have them, but new research suggests that some of them may have actually been passed down to us unknowingly from our mothers. Our Son Jung-in reports on a study that is out of the US that supports this very theory.
In a laboratory at the University of Michigan, a mother rat is taking care of her newborn pups. But when peppermint scent is sprayed, the mother abandons her babies and retreats into a corner. The babies also start to show signs of distress. Before the female rat was even pregnant, she was programmed to fear the smell of peppermint through the use of unpleasant electric shocks. After giving birth, the babies who had never been subjected to the experience still showed fear when exposed to the minty smell. This time, scientists separate the pups from their mother in another chamber that is connected by pipe. When the peppermint fragrance is sprayed near the mother, the newborns in the other room still react in fear. Scientists say it's because they picked up on the special odor emitted from their scared mother, which was transferred through the pipe.
In a series of experiments, we found that the mother does not have to be physically present with the pups. It is enough for the pups to be exposed to the odor of the frightened mother paired with a...
Researchers explain that young rats are unable to learn information about environmental dangers, but if their mother is the source of that threat information, they can perceive her fear and produce lasting memories. They added that the latest findings could provide some answers behind similar incidents in humans, such as the children of Holocaust survivors report nightmares and flashbacks to events they never experienced. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now, in some very exciting entertainment-related news, the blockbuster smash film Roaring Currents has become the highest-grossing film in Korean cinema history. Distribution company CJ E&M says the movie, which depicts Admiral Lee Sun-shin's dramatic victory over Japanese naval forces hundreds of years ago, has grossed more than $126 million in Korea since its release around 1 month ago. The previous record was set by Avatar in 2010. And finally, taking a brief look at tomorrow's weather. It's going to be another beautiful early fall day with highs nationwide reaching the high 20s to low 30s. Let's take a look at the weather in your part of the world. Well, those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more of the latest stories, don't forget to check out our very comprehensive website, arirang.co.kr/news for more stories. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.